Hello, my name is Matt Whitman, and this is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. It's a podcast that evolved out of a YouTube channel of the same name, where I was like, you know what we should do? We should just pick a book of the Bible, and we should work right through it in little 10-minute chunks. And it's going to be kind of funny, and we're going to learn things together, and we're going to make new friends on the internet, and it's going to be great. But you know what's hard? Making videos on the internet. It takes a ton of time, and I don't know how YouTube works. I've been doing that for like 8 years. I still have no clue what you're supposed to do to like make it so that people want to watch it. I don't understand YouTube at all. So eventually I was like, let's just do it as an audio thing. And that's what you're listening to right now. It's an audio podcast where we work through books of the Bible as slow as I feel like working through them, because I got different stuff that I want to talk about and different rabbit trails I want to chase down. And if this is your first time here, I just want to say, I think it's been a lovely time. I've met so many wonderful people along the way. We're always talking about interesting stuff. And it turns out there's so much more here behind the biblical text than you would catch at first glance if you just give yourself the time to look at it. It's this whole gigantic adventure. So it's been a blast. Whether you've been here for a long time or you're here for the first time, I'm really glad you're here. Usually, we don't use this time for me to do therapy, but today we're going to, and it's going to make sense why in just a minute. Here's the thing. I got picked last when I was a kid. A lot, and I'd like to work that through a little bit with you right now. Up through third grade, I get it, right? It was the 1980s. It's a merit-based society. There are actual stakes to losing at things socially on the playground or in gym class. The teachers gave you a little more free rein to ridicule each other. So if you lost, it was costly. And back in those days of yore, you used to have pickers. I don't know how they picked the pickers. I don't think I recall that protocol at all, but I know I wasn't the picker in any of these games. And the pickers had a real clear sense of who was good at things and who wasn't good at things. And they rightly identified me as being not good at things. And so when they'd pick, it would always come down to like me and this one other kid who had real curly hair and was super slow and farted all the time. And it'd be like, do you want Brian? Or like, I guess like I could take Matt. And then I'd get assigned to a team like that. I didn't get picked. I got everyone has to participate begrudgingly, so we'll take that guy. And probably the most frustrating part about the scenario I just described is not the effect that it had on my soul or my future trajectory for life or my sense of self-worth. The most frustrating part is that they were completely right, other than that Brian kid who farted a lot. I think I should have been ahead of him. No, just genuinely, I wasn't very good at things, and I definitely did not contribute to my teams in positive ways. I was nice. I was just awful at everything. But then it carried over to the classroom, right? It's like, but here I'm serviceable at classroom stuff. I can remember some things, and I'm a pretty good teammate, and I try real hard, and I do my homework and stuff. Now I still get picked last. It's transferable, unfortunately. Well, eventually, yeah, I got to be like fourth worst and then fifth worst in my class. And by fifth or sixth grade, I was right in the middle somewhere, and then you're just blending in, and everything's fine. I'd like to think that in some weird way that whole pecking order thing was good for me, but it was really sad when it was going on. And there is a unique sense of rejection that happens when you not only get picked last, but there's an active negotiation to figure out who has to take you. And likewise in the book of Matthew, we've been seeing that this theme of rejection is a really thick one. Like Matthew really wants us to get that Jesus isn't just being mistreated. He isn't just being subjected to a kangaroo court and a joke of a conviction, but he is also being abandoned and rejected. He wants us to feel what Jesus is feeling. He wants us to get, theologically, the full weight of all of the different levels in which the sin of all of humanity, not just the Jewish people who rejected him, not just the horrible murderers and awful people, but all of humanity for whom Christ is going to go to the cross and die. Matthew wants us to feel the full weight of all of those consequences that he felt in order to play his role, in order to carry out his role in the redemptive plan of God, which is being the great sacrifice on the cross, the completion of all of the Old Testament sacrificial law, of all of the Old Testament themes and stories and all of that. So obviously, you're going to be able to imagine that it's really painful to get nailed to chunks of wood and flogged and get thorns jammed on your head. Like the physical suffering part, though I can't imagine physical suffering like that, you can still vaguely picture it, and you can imagine you wouldn't want it to happen to you, and you can see that like that's not just at all. Jesus is going around saying, like, we're not going to use the sword on people, and then people metaphorically use it on him. Like, okay, I get that. I can understand injustice, and I get that he is being mistreated horribly, and that the state is abusing its power, and that the people who are adjacent to the state and have the ear of the state and by proxy get to direct and pinpoint the sword of the state in political and social assassination moves to prop themselves up. I get how unjust that is. I can picture how awful that would feel. But what is often glossed over is the rejection theme. And that one I kind of get too, though not to this degree at all. That said, like, all joking aside, and it is fun to like make fun of younger versions of ourselves and have a laugh about the tough things that we went through. Straight up, I know what it feels like to be standing with 28 other people and one at a time have everybody else get picked and taken off the board by people you'd really like to have like you, by people you'd really like to have accept you, and just to see the numbers around you dwindling and dwindling, and to have a very clear childhood sense of your lack of desirability, and to have that reinforced again and again and again. As I said before, maybe that was good for me in some weird way, but it dang well didn't feel like it at the time to impoverished little third grade Matt wearing clothes that his mom sewed for him because we needed to save money and everybody else got to have clothes from the store. I felt like an outsider, and it hurt badly, and it really hurt when they would negotiate over who had to be stuck with me. I do understand a little fraction of that sense of rejection. But what I don't understand is the culmination of that sense of rejection that comes along a little later after being picked last, where Christ ultimately sees the Father turn away from him and allow him to die on the cross. And that's really where this theme of rejection and abandonment that this suffering servant goes through is most punctuated and most clear. But all of these additional rejections that are unfolding along the way are very poignant. And if you've ever felt rejected, deeply rejected, then it's worth pausing on this point to appreciate this aspect of what Jesus went through as well. It occurs to me I still haven't read you any actual Bible, which is advertised in the name of the podcast. Matthew 27, verse 15. Check out this far more pointed, far more hurtful, getting picked last thing that Jesus is about to experience. Now it was the governor's custom at the feast to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew it was out of envy that they'd handed Jesus over to him. Well, while Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to have Jesus executed. "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Christ?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I'm innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It's your responsibility." All the people answered, "Let his blood be upon us and upon our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Set aside all the theological implications that we're going to get to. Set aside all the prophetic fulfillment and all of that stuff that we're going to get to. Set aside the farce of a trial that we're going to get to. Set aside the physical pain that we're going to get to. Just imagine what it would be like to be in that position and to be picked last in this way. To have somebody like Barabbas, the metaphorical kid who isn't good at things and he farts all the time, get picked over you as your countrymen, and people who were singing your praises just a couple of days earlier are publicly and unapologetically debating right in front of you, where you can totally hear them, about who should be picked last, and then you find out there really isn't much of any debate at all. We'll take the murderer rioter guy and we'll decisively choose Jesus to be picked dead last here. Emphasis on dead. More on this process tomorrow. Also, thank you so much to everybody who supports the program at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. I know that this time of year, for whatever reason, is September, Labor Day as I record this, a lot of people this time of year always feel like, man, I got to look at expenses maybe, and a lot of people tap out. And that happened again this month, and that is totally cool. Thank you for the time that you were able to kick in and help make this thing happen. That is awesome. Signing up to do that is never like a lifelong commitment, and I always know that it can just be weird on the back end of things. And I want to make it super clear. It ain't weird between us. Thank you so much for helping out when it made sense for you to help out. And I'm hyper grateful that you're still here and that we still get to do this together. I'd also like to say thank you for all y'all listening to me whine about getting picked last as a kid. And I'm sure Brian turned out to be an absolutely lovely person. I shouldn't have said those mean things about his farting. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.